Hello and welcome to the Good Convo. If you're unfamiliar with the SCP Foundation and the extended universe that goes along with it, please refer to the link in the description below. Down there you'll find a video that very clearly describes the wide and expanding world of the SCP Foundation and its wiki. Now, without further ado, on to the video. Testing. 1, 2, 3. Alright. Allow me to introduce myself. My name is Dr. Jonathan Gray, and I am an employee at the SCP Foundation. I've decided to document my findings and interactions at the Foundation in the form of an audio log due to the nature of my memory. I have found that there are some inconsistencies and gaps in my memory that have caused me to doubt my ability to accurately retain the information gained through my work here. I suppose I should start from the beginning, or rather, what I can remember of it. I was born and raised in rural America. I don't remember the name of my home state, my town, friends, family. From a young age, though, I showed remarkable intelligence. I was a prodigy with no equal. I breezed through school and eventually received my doctorate in optical physics at the age of 17. I received praise and adoration for everything I said and did. I began to develop technology in the field of military stealth, and I was onto something big. I saw the future in stealth tech being able to hide all forms of electromagnetic emission from any sensor, but I lacked the funding. No organization would give me a grant due to how theoretical it was. Eventually, I did find a sponsor that provided me with an exuberant amount of funding, with the agreement of me giving the rights to my products to his company first. While it was shameful to sell myself out to a company, I needed the money to see my vision come to fruition. Unfortunately, in my confidence, or maybe my arrogance, I had failed to triple-check the viability of a few calculations on the blueprints. By the day of the demonstration, I still didn't have a functioning prototype. I couldn't stall anymore, and the company threatened to pull out. In my desperation, I dug deep into the black market. I accidentally stumbled upon an old woman that claimed that she was in possession of a prism that had supernatural properties. While this was a direct insult to my clinical, methodical understanding of the observed universe, I was under a time crunch, and I was willing to swallow my pride as a scientist in order to see my project succeed. We met at an abandoned warehouse where she apparently lived. Her tent was propped up with old metal poles, and there was trash everywhere. She was dressed like a stereotypical gypsy woman, had this strange aura about her. I reasoned that this was most likely the desired effect, in order to convince me that this wasn't a scam. Still, curiosity compelled me to suffer her presence. She seemed to reverently cradle the object in her arms. She showed me what was wrapped in the dirty cloth, and my resolve was shattered. I looked upon the most complex prism ever conceived. It was shining with a brilliance that was brighter than a lighthouse. I felt my heart race as I asked her what its properties were. She looked at me smiling and said with complete confidence that it had the ability to superimpose someone's will on the electromagnetic spectrum itself. Hearing this clean and scientific term coming from the mouth of a crazed gypsy made me lose my rationale entirely. I quickly purchased the item from her for a ridiculous sum and made my way back to the lab. When I arrived, I instantly started studying the object. It was incredible, unexplainable, like all the laws of nature were being torn asunder before my very eyes. It was just like the old woman said. All I had to do was think about the direction and frequency which I wanted the photons to move. I felt like with this, anything could be possible. I managed to create a fully functioning prototype that was able to completely hide the presence of the user from all sensory tech. On the day of the demonstration, however, something went wrong. I don't know why or how, but the prism was emitting more light than it had been previously. When I strapped the apparatus to my chest, it began an abnormal pulsing. I assured the observers and the investors that there was nothing to fear, and continued with the demo. It was much too late to pull out for a few safety concerns, I thought. When I flipped the switch on the proton core, everything went black. No, I hadn't lost consciousness. I could still see, hear, and feel. It was as though, for a brief moment, all the color in the room had been drained and focused in the center of my creation. Then there was a flash. I thought I had gone blind, it was so bright. I felt an indescribable pain. Then the true darkness of unconsciousness took me. When I came to, I was on the floor, wearing my harness. Around me there were bodies, lying motionless on the floor. Fear took me as I realized the core must have exploded and killed everyone. I saw movement out of the corner of my eye and quickly focused on one of the bodies, starting to slowly sit upright. I was at first relieved that I was not the only survivor, but this feeling quickly turned to confusion. I did not recognize the man at first. He was young, mid-20s, wearing a lab coat. His scruffy, unkempt hair was oddly familiar, while seeming completely alien. With a mix of horror and confusion, I sat motionless, as I realized the youth I was looking at could be none other than myself. This youth looked around, and when his eyes met mine, I could see the same realization hitting him. There we sat, in silence for a good while, not daring to speak, internally attempting to rationalize the irrational. Eventually, the other me spoke. "Are you me?" I answered as calmly as a man talking with his apparent clone could. So it would seem. After these words left my lips, both of our attentions were drawn to another figure, slowly sitting up. Again, I saw the look of horror and confusion wash across my own face, as another clone sat up and realized what was happening before him. More and more bodies began to regain consciousness. In total, there were 7 copies of me, sitting in a circle, around the carnage of our failure. Presently, one of the clones spoke. He introduced himself as Blue, and stated that he didn't know why he felt compelled to call himself this when he was certain that he had a normal name before, but it felt like it was gone now. Looking into his eyes, I could see that they were a bright, vibrant blue. He asked the rest of us our names. Each one responded with a different color, each color corresponding with the color of their eyes. When the man who called himself Blue asked me my name, I reached deep into my mind to try to find it, but all I could think of was one word: gray. After we all shared our names, we began trying to rationally discuss what was going on. It was clear that we all had the same memories, but there were gaps and pieces missing from it all. Names, places, even important people felt like they were completely wiped from our minds. As each color contributed to the discussion, it became evident that our personalities varied wildly, with Blue acting as some sort of leader, and a man calling himself Red challenging him sharply. Soon, the conversation began to escalate as we tried to decide what to do next. Some wanted to go off on their own and explore the world, while others wanted to find a way to somehow put us back together as a whole. I myself was of the mind that we should be joined again to perhaps complete the gaps in our memories. Things fell apart, though, when Red decided that in order to fix this, there should only be one color, and the best way to assure this was for us to kill each other until there was one man standing. Some agreed, others fled. I am slightly ashamed to say that I myself was among those who ran out of the lab that cold night. After I was certain that I had lost my pursuers, I started forming a plan. I knew I would need help. The only person that I could think of that would have any information regarding something as strange as this would be that crazy woman that had given us the object in the first place. I managed to steal a car from the street outside the lab and drove it towards the warehouse. On the way there, it occurred to me that the others might have had the same idea, and I stepped on the gas. But if there were clones of me hunting each other, perhaps they would be too busy killing to think of getting information. I felt a sweeping sense of relief as I pulled into the large parking lot and saw that there were no signs of any other vehicles. I sprinted out of the car and charged through the double metal doors into the dark, gloomy atmosphere where all the supernatural BS had truly begun. Why? Why did I even come here in the first place? I should have never bought that cursed prism. Cursed? What if it was cursed all along? What if this was the intention of that evil-looking hag? She knew exactly what to say to make me want it. It was so obvious she was manipulating me. I was so blinded by my fear of failure that I was willingly jumping into a world of supernatural and cosmic horror. These thoughts tore at my mind as I approached the ragged tent. There was no sound. It was so quiet. I felt like my heartbeat would give away my presence. I steeled myself, prepared to confront the source of all this terror and confusion. I peeled the curtain aside and rushed in, only to see the mangled form of the woman lying on the floor, her neck cleanly broken. I stood there in utter silence. There was no way this was happening. I didn't know what I was originally going to do when I found her, but I had no intentions of murder. A soft voice rang out in the bitter cold. Interesting. I didn't think you would be the one to show up. I don't know how to describe to you the sick feeling of hearing your own voice coming from behind you. This, combined with the current situation, made my knees nearly buckle. I turned, only to see those bright blue, shining eyes in the moonlight. I asked Blue what he was doing here, and what he meant by being the one to show up. His eyes darkened as he approached me. You seemed so cool and analytical. I didn't think you'd be the type of person to spring to action. He passed me and stood over the corpse of the woman. I expected you to hide out for at least a little while before coming here. This place is the natural first step to find answers about our situation. It also makes for an effective trap. My body tensed up as I knew what was coming. Despite my fear, I asked, "Why are you doing this?" His eyes met mine and, with no emotion showing on his face, my face, he said, I think Red has a point. There should be only one. There's only room on this planet for one of us, and I want to be that one. He took a step towards me, and I knew I needed to run. But my body wouldn't move. Every inch of my nervous system was screaming at me to flee, but in the internal chaos, all I could do was watch my doom draw closer. His motion abruptly stopped, however, as he cocked his head. I listened as well, and realized that I could hear radio chatter echoing from somewhere within the warehouse. He looked back at me and smiled. Maybe some other time, then. I can't be bothered to be caught by the police now. Not when there's so much work to do. He pat me on the shoulder as he passed me. I still couldn't move. My mind was racing. My head was spinning. How were the police here? Who called them? Men in full combat gear shortly came and seized me. I could tell immediately that this wasn't a normal SWAT team. They had only small insignias on their shoulders that read SCP. They dragged me off and threw me into a van with a bag on my head. When the bag was removed, I was sitting in what looked like an interrogation room. I can't get into the details about the interrogation process, because if the ethics committee gets wind of some of the information-gathering tactics used by the task force, there would be a mountain of paperwork. To put it simply, I gave all the information I could, and the rest was extracted from me. Through this, they found out about the nature of my situation. I had still been wearing the device when they had captured me, and they said they would be putting Foundation resources into the study of the project. They told me my expertise in this area would be a great asset. They offered me a position as project overseer for the containment and study of the other clones, or colors as we call them. They still have me on file as an anomaly myself, but the containment procedures are more of a formality than a requirement. I am not allowed to leave the facility that I work in. I cannot deny access to any or all personal records or possessions, and I am not allowed to access the outside internet connection except with permission and monitoring from my security staff. I have taken this position because I truly believe that these copies of mine are dangerous and need to be contained. I will dedicate the rest of my life to hunting down and capturing my clones and studying methods to put us back in one piece. The SCP Foundation stands for Secure, Contain, Protect. I fully support the Foundation and its mission. My name is Jonathan Gray, and the path before me is clear.